Pete, lovely to talk to you today, and thank you for your time. What I'd like to start asking about as a question generally, what are the key issues facing call centre managers today?
It's a really great question, Gareth. There's obviously a range of challenges. I think one of the most common challenges that we've seen and are hearing from the industry really relates to the limitations of their existing systems. Within the contact centre, they're running a variety of fragmented systems between, the IVR channels, their CRM, the intranet that they're using. There's a whole kind of suite of interactions that take place between the agent and the customer at any given point in time, and having all of them kind of line up and communicate to each other for a way that's really meaningful for not only the customer but as well as the agent, to drive things like personalization, helping the agent be more prepared for that call by understanding where that customer's come from and what experience they've had, is incredibly challenging. And I think the kind of the beacon of what good looks like for customers is becoming clearer and clearer in the market today. And contact centers want to get there. They want to deliver personalization. They want to know their customers. They want to know where they've been before they touch down with the agent to have that phone conversation. But when that's what you want to do, but you're working with completely disparate systems that don't talk to each other, it makes it really, really challenging to deliver a great customer experience. And so I wouldn't say that that's unique to the contact center. I think it's organizationally, but being in these operations and managing legacy and newer systems, many of which are in stages of or periods of transformation, makes it really, really tough to deliver a great customer experience every day without that visibility and connectivity. That's definitely something that we've seen kind of come up consistently in the conversations that we've been having.
And what would you like to be able to solve for in terms of issues over the next 3 to 5 years? What are the things you think that organisations will be focusing on to deliver value in a contact centre environment?
It's again a very good question. In terms of the problems that we'd like to solve as a company, as a tech company that's helping organisations understand why their customers are contacting, the reality of why they're contacting is, I think, really just building out that business case for the customer within the organisation, and not to the extent that, well, what is the value of the customer, but to the extent that the organisation understands almost with laser focus, where do they need to prioritise their investment and their resources to drive the biggest impact to their CX and to their contact centre through enablement. And that's something that's really, really challenging, which comes back to that limitations of existing systems, because without that really kind of clean view of, well, what is driving customer demand, what's the experience, what are their needs, and being able to kind of back that up with hard data, which talks to the commercial impact of all of that, it's really hard to navigate through what other things we should be investing in, not only for the contact center, but to help them do better for our customers. And so that's where we're really focused on solving that problem and kind of bridging that gap that exists today.
What would you say are the major factors in them bridging those gaps, so actually achieving those type of outcomes, and how does your organisation fit into that?
I think one of the biggest gaps is just having data that everybody believes in, and that can be easily communicated across the organisation. I think there's been huge strides that have been made in the last decade to champion the voice of the customer and make that very, very prominent. I was most recently reading a benchmarking review that, for the 6th year running, CX is still seen as the #1 differentiator for organisations. I mean, there's been this huge kind of shift in getting that the customer kind of positioned at the top end of the organisation and their decision making. But what has been delayed is that kind of, from a contact centre perspective, that enablement and that data and that story that comes with communicating, not just the customer component. That's obviously where there's great synergies in the work that we're doing together. But how does that tie to the kind of the commercials and the reality of the operation? And so I think bridging that gap and kind of building the narrative of the contact center and the role of the customer within the contact center is a big challenge because it hasn't been understood as well as it should. And so that's what we're really kind of focused on helping organisations do to unlock their contact center potential.
Yeah, and with the work that you do at Operative Intelligence, how do the insights that you deliver result in a better experience for the contact center customers?
I mean, there's a number of different ways. To take some kind of very specific examples, one is helping the organisation understand where are there opportunities to reduce customer effort by helping and promoting channels where customers can complete simple, quick transactions through self-service capabilities. What we know from data is that for certain interactions, specific cohorts of customers don't want to speak with someone. They want to have their issue resolved as quickly and effectively as possible. But in order to be able to do that, there needs to be an investment into self-service. So with that, there needs to be a business case and there needs to be a customer component to that that's very compelling. And so that is data and insight that we are bringing to the contact center, who are championing to their executives to kind of drive digital enablement out of the contact center and through enablement teams, to kind of really reduce effort for customers and ultimately that bottom line expenditure for the contact center. So that's been one big focus most recently, especially given the events that have kind of transpired over the last 12 months. Another piece is really just kind of helping contact center managers understand, based on what customers are asking them to do, who are their best reps and what are they doing differently on their calls that's allowing them to deliver better call outcomes. This, I think, has been challenging contact move remote, given what's transpired in the last 12 months. And so having that ability to get really, really targeted and being able to drill in and pinpoint, what are your best reps doing differently based on the customer's needs, and being able to replicate that and train it out in a really targeted way across their entire agent population is something that's very, very powerful, not only in terms of helping kind of deliver consistency and great customer experience, but also really engaging the agents and their performance and their development in kind of getting really specific around what you need to do to deliver a great customer outcome. And so that's been another big focus of what we've been working on.
How do you see the synergies between what you do in Operative Intelligence and conversational AI, and when you sort of pull it all together around customer experience?
So I think that the obvious synergy is, between what our organizations do is it's promoting the customer first and foremost, and kind of empowering the organization and operators and leaders to have really critical visibility into what it is their customers want. Like from our perspective, what is the experience within the contact center and what are the commercials that sit behind that? From a broader enterprise listening capability, what is everything else that's going on within the customer's life? So I think the synergies really are twofold. One is being able to empower organizations to kind of zoom right out and kind of really get a holistic image on what is happening with their customers and in the world of their customers, but also being able to kind of drill right down into the specifics of, well, what's happening within the channel and what's actually happening with our customers within our own business, and being able to kind of target ways to unlock that potential. And so that's where I think there's just a phenomenal synergy, and the more momentum and visibility that the organization has with great data around what's happening to customers, the better.
When we look at programs, sometimes we think about transactional experiences with customers or episodic, more complex experiences and relationships. Do you ever find there's any tension between the sort of area that you work on in a contact center environment and that broader picture in terms of understanding the relationship? And what do you see as the challenges as a successful program in those different areas?
Yeah, look, it's a really great point, Gareth. I mean, what we kind of bring to our platform and our approach is very much an element of service design and delivery. My co-founder James kind of calls it lining up the holes in the Swiss cheese. in order to deliver a really phenomenal customer experience, you do need to have some understanding of, what is happening with the customer in their world. What are the kind of the needs and wants that they have, and how does that align with the organization's value proposition, and then how is that ultimately delivered through to an interaction. And so when you're able to line all of those things up, between the episode and ultimate interaction with the organization, and having that context, that's when phenomenal experiences are unlocked. And that is a very kind of progressive way of thinking about customer experience. It's cross-functional, it's kind of multi-dimensional. But in terms of the tension, I think that the kind of just the reality is in the contact center space, they need to do things tomorrow and get results. So kind of being able to kind of take that time and have that investment and that resource to be able to kind of go through an enterprise process just isn't always a reality. And so, we kind of see the tension is we've got things that we need to get done. We're underwater. We've got goals that we need to hit, and we need to find the things that we can just start doing today to start getting the crank moving on improving performance. But over time, creating that capacity within teams and kind of building that kind of know-how in taking insights to action, I think kind of opens them up to being able to think more episodically, because they've got really just better control around their demand and their customer experience. And so at that point, they kind of work really nicely hand in hand.
I presume as well, Pete, that a better experience can be a lower cost to serve by reducing recontact. The basic mechanisms that tie a poor experience are also things that tend to cost businesses money.
Yes, definitely. I mean, what we've seen consistently across a number of different verticals globally is that the longer the call, the less likely it is to be resolved, and the lower the satisfaction, right? It's really, really powerful data. So, what the kind of general lead indicator of success for a significant amount of call types that still come into the contact center are, I need this resolved quickly, I want it resolved efficiently and done right the first time, and I'm going to be more satisfied as a result. And the commercials that are associated with that means you don't have repeat contacts, you've got a lower handle time, which is a lower cost per call, and you've ultimately got happier customers. And so just kind of having that understanding of the commercial opportunity, but being able to tie that back in a very actionable way to, well, what are some kind of really specific things that we can do, and what are the calls that we should address, really does make it a fantastic kind of proof point of that outcome.
What's the role of artificial intelligence in how you guys operate and what you deliver to your clients?
So we really see artificial intelligence as augmenting the human capability. We established a product, and we established a product out of a methodology that we used within contact centers for over a decade. And that methodology was helping organizations understand why their customers were calling. And at a high level, that would involve a bunch of SMEs in a room, locked in for 2 weeks with 3,000 Post-it notes on the walls, and sorting through all of those Post-it notes to understand what are the drivers, what are the sub-drivers, and then doing that 5 whys exercise of understanding, well, what was the root cause of the contact in the first place? That would take weeks, so a significant amount of investment, but a very sound methodology. And so the way that we've approached the problem of understanding demand is to use that framework, but to let AI do the heavy lifting. So you no longer need to dedicate weeks of your very valuable SMEs, weeks of time, a lot of manual analysis. All of that can be delivered through some really, really clever and powerful technology. And so that's really kind of how we think about it. Obviously, as a byproduct of that, you have advantages that humans don't, which is kind of decision-making and analytics at scale, which is really, really important. There's only so much kind of insight that you can glean from a sample set of data that humans can kind of analyze. So I think AI really just gives that next leveling and scale, which allows you to understand, across potentially millions and millions of calls a year. And I mean, ultimately within the contact center, across the calls, the processes, the agents, and the inquiries, trillions of interactions, what is going on within that ecosystem? And that is something that AI can do very, very well when it's kind of trained and is solving a very, very specific problem.
Yeah, it's an interesting parallel in what we're doing, Pete, around using artificial intelligence to understand what people are talking about, the things that are front of mind for them and what the relationships are with those experiences, unpacking those in terms of their emotionality, the causality, and in terms of what's important in getting that end outcome, which is satisfaction or a willingness to advocate. Because I think the underlying premise of the technologies is that real commonality with what OI is doing in terms of understanding the purpose of the call and how that purpose drives the subsequent experience and all the analysis you do. So I think it's very interesting.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, I'd love to hear from your perspective, Garreth. You know, what are the big challenges that you're looking to solve in the next 3 to 5 years from a human listening perspective?
Yeah, we're very much to the point you mentioned before, Peter, around scale. So traditionally, qualitative research, which is flexible, has the ability to be able to listen to humans, react, be able to explore things using techniques like laddering that get beyond the facile, front of mind type of questions that really don't illuminate on what it is that's causing things to be as they are. We can overcome that with conversational AI and almost create an impossible benefit, which is less time for the person to express better quality thinking, deeper levels of insight over more powerful AI-powered analytics means you get more data, better insights, and a better experience for the customer. So all of that at scale becomes a fairly compelling proposition where, in the old days, you might look at a number on a screen and say, 56% of people are satisfied, or you've got a net promoter score of plus 20, and you look back and you say, why? And they say, good service. We're going beyond that into saying, what are the root causes of that service? What are the things that they're looking for on the call? What are the relationships between the experiences of people when they're having that contact experience, and really unpacking it down to that sort of, again, as you put it yourself, human level. What is the experience that should be delivered?
Yeah. And what are you seeing, Garreth, in terms of, because there's been some really big advancements in terms of the way that organizations are kind of proactively engaging with customers. Obviously, I think what you're doing is really market leading with conversational AI to garner insights. How are you seeing the adoption of conversational AI and the benefits that's having not only for the customer but for the organization versus more traditional approaches that have been used?
The traditional research program has gone through a set of changes over the last decade, from being you get your feedback, you analyse it, you write a report, and you send it through to the client, which might have taken 6 to 8 weeks, and that went out the window probably 8 years ago. Then dashboards started coming in, the ability to look at information, be able to get it in real time, but again, not always with that level of insight that I talked about before. And what we're able to do with the conversational AI is to create what we call dynamic insights. And what that means is that the conversational AI is always talking to a large number of people, listening to what they're saying, adapting, picking up new themes, new topics that people are talking about, and then surfacing that dynamically into a dashboard environment where you can literally have your finger on the pulse of what's going on, but also the what, the so what, and the now what, in terms of what it's telling you are the drivers of those experiences and what you need to do about it. All of that ties back to the pace at which organizations operate. You mentioned before about the pace at which contact centers operate, and really match insights, I think, for the first time, in terms of how quickly you can get that information back and do something with it in terms of how you're resourcing, how you're matching your routing, how you're using that information to deliver the sort of experience that you want, instead of having that frustrating gap where by the time you get the information, it's out of date and things have already moved on.
Yeah. And are you seeing from an organizational perspective, with this increase in insights essentially being on demand, that that has been a shift for them internally to be able to kind of take that data and act on it very, very quickly? Is there a delay there? Has adoption been quick? Are you seeing kind of immediate outcomes? What does that world look like?
Yeah, it varies. So it does, depending upon what part of the organization that we're working with. If it's in a service delivery context, it's all about yesterday. So take a retail environment, for example. If there's a systemic issue in a store where the store is unclean, you need to know that straight away, because clearly there's a process around cleaning the store that's not being applied that you need to fix. Otherwise, it's going to have a material impact in terms of sales and word of mouth and reputational risk, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one example. In the longer term, the way we configure the technology is it'll look at different cadences. So you can say, well, what's happening yesterday? What's happening last week? What's happening this quarter? What are the trends that we're seeing emerging throughout the year? So one of the motivating questions when we developed this technology, going back quite a number of years, was that if we'd known about a particular trend, we would have done something about it, and we would have been in a position now in terms of a product that wasn't developed, that a competitor developed. And we took that to heart, and we said, well, if we can actually spot these trends occurring by using that dynamic probing and being able to really drill into emergent themes that are coming through conversational AI, we can give our clients in that sort of quarterly to 6-month horizon real insight around, hey guys, something's going on, you need to take a look at it. People are starting to talk about X, which could be a competitor, it could be a social theme, a new technology that they can actually jump into pretty quickly. Either it's an opportunity or a risk, and do something about it. And that's probably more the case from a strategic perspective when you're looking at that higher level you mentioned before around the total relationship rather than a particular contact instance, where again it's all about what happened yesterday, maintaining standards, and maybe in the medium term starting to look at those underlying trends and starting to understand the patterns that exist within the data around days of week, times a day, resourcing levels and so forth, that you can get a handle on and optimize for.
Yeah, no, we're seeing very similar things within the contact center. I mean, historically, they've had an understanding of what do volumes look like month on month and when their peak periods were, but getting into that next level of helping them kind of break down their demand and really understand with a high level of fidelity what are the drivers and when do they start and what are those trends and how much is that costing them, is just a new layer of insight for the contact center to kind of proactively manage those peaks. So, for example, knowing that your tax time drive is going to increase your volume by 30%, but there's only inquiries that happen throughout that period, and knowing specifically what those actions are that customers are wanting to take, you can be proactive 6 months in advance to mitigate that peak. And that really is the power that we're seeing in having that kind of continuous as well as historical view on what is happening with the customer and what impact is that driving on your business, so that you're able to make just more informed and proactive decisions that ultimately makes it better for, in the contact center, the frontline people. You're reducing the peak, you're taking work out, which is lower cost, and for customers, it's a lot easier for them to interact with the organisation at a time that they need something.
Yeah, it's a great point, Pete. And I think one of the things coming back to artificial intelligence that it allows us to do with the data is it's not just about that temporal element in terms of looking trends and being proactive. And I agree with you 100% that's going from reactive to proactive is a signal capability of both our businesses in helping our clients what they do, but it's also unearthing the non-obvious insights. And I think the way that artificial intelligence works by default in being able to analyze a whole myriad of different relationships and find underlying patterns that are not obvious from the traditional ways of analysing the data is just becoming increasingly more important. And again, that's where you can start to get really great case studies about how the technology can really change people's thinking about what they're doing and look at workflows and have a look at the way resourcing patterns are done that historically until quite recently just hasn't been possible.
Brilliant. Well, that was a lot of fun, Garreth.
Yeah, that was great, and thank you, Pete. I really appreciate your the conversation today, and it's been awesome partnering up with OI, and impressed by the work that you guys are doing, and yeah, it's an amazing application of technology.
Thank you, Garreth. No, we're really fortunate to be able to partner with such a innovative and progressive company like the Evolve Group, and we're looking forward to continuing this great partnership and kind of going down this road of our mission to kind of really help organisations unlock their potential through insights collectively. So thanks for having a chat today. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, Pete. Appreciate it.